So our third speaker this evening is Lesley Riddoch. Leslie is one of Scotland's best-known commentators and broadcasters. Leslie was the assistant editor for The Scotsman in the 1990s, and in 1995 Leslie was the editor for The Scotswoman when female staff wrote, edited and produced the paper. As well as the latter, Leslie was also contributing editor for the Sunday Herald. To many, Leslie is best known for her broadcasting, where she has broadcasted programmes on BBC Two, Channel 4, Radio 4 and BBC Radio Scotland, for which she has won 2 Sony Speech Broadcast Awards. Lesley Riddoch, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks very much indeed. Can you, is this working all right? Yeah? I'm a sort of at the other end of Fife here. I live up near Newborough, so I'm kind of up on the sunny bank of the day, although it's not sunny tonight, I can assure you. I'm just listening to what people were saying there, particularly just John was talking about the kind of threats that are posed really by staying within the United Kingdom. And I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, do you know the biggest threat? The biggest threat is stagnation. That's it. The biggest threat is not the sort of tangible list of things that can go wrong. It's that nothing happens. It's that there is no energy. It's that the ideas that you have can never quite be realised properly. And that's what I really wanted to talk about a wee bit, because as well as the stuff I've been doing, which is actually all in the past, some of you may know, I left the BBC in 2004. And if I hadn't left then, I would have had to have left now, if you know what I mean. Because it's not an organisation that's very easy to work for, in the sense that it has a very limited conception of what Scotland could be. And after a while, it's terribly demoralising to work in a place that doesn't actually see the kind of vitality that you see. And in a way, that's like a kind of microcosm of the problem of the union to me. But I've heard a lot recently, being at different meetings, where a lot of people from the no camp will say, well actually, you know, with devolution you do have a lot of the powers to fix a lot of the things that we described tonight. And I mean, there's plenty of ways you could respond to that. I want to respond my way, because what I think the problem is we may well have the powers to do quite a few things. We don't have the will. Now, where does will come from? Where does the drive to look for better come from? And it's something to do, I mean, let's face it, we've all got the power to be blooming athletes in this room. We've all got the power to kind of get up in the morning and eat nothing but fruit all day. We've all got the power to run around in the rain and do 20 miles and come back in here again, theoretically. But we don't. You know, there's the question in life is, why do any organisms, whether it's human beings or a nation, why does it do less than it could do? Because the capacity of Scotland is unbelievable. If you've been first of the parish and been abroad, I'm assuming you've all been elsewhere, you come back and you realise that this place is blessed. I mean, the landscape is astonishing, but I mean natural resources, astonishing. We know about the oil and the gas. My mother's family are from Wick, or for those of you who know of Wick, to be precise, Pulteney Town, because you can get into fights about that. And we used to go up there from Belfast every year on summer holiday, and everybody could tell you that the top 6 tidal stream sites in the world were sitting in the Pentland Firth. Now, you know, so we don't even, it's not just that we have this abundance of fossil fuels, we also have incredible capacity for renewable energy. And a smart country would be at the moment using the income from one to quietly be shifted its weight to the other. Because the fossil fuels will run out. And we, mercifully, have got an abundance of renewable energy and smart folk with engineering capacity to be able to make that transition. Actually, not just for us, But for the world, in some respects, we have tidal and wave power really in abundance. But this is a pretty good example of how you can't get to grips with it. I have spent a lot of time in Norway. I'm doing a PhD there at the moment, and I also set up a group called Nordic Horizons that takes a lot of Nordic specialists over to speak in the Scottish Parliament. Because folk have kind of forgotten, in a sense, they are our neighbours. And, you know, living on this side of the country, you can see it in our language, you can see it sometimes in the Pantile roofs of Fife. We had trade to the east, they were our nearest trading neighbours, and we need to look east again, because actually, that's where we need to go. Where we need to go is to become a small social democracy. That is the cat trying to get out of the bag. That is the shape of Scotland that's trying to come out and say something. That is how we've been voting since 1921. Now maybe people don't rate voting very much anymore, because after all, it brought us Thatcher. But let's not chuck the baby out with the bathwater. Voting gives you the shape of the will of people, because there's no other way to know it. And since the Labour Party was actually incepted in Scotland, folk have been voting for it at a rate of over 40% since all those years, with the exception of national governments and 3 inexplicable Tory governments in the 1950s. Scotland has voted Labour, God love us. So we've been trying to express a different set of values, because during that period there have been very few Labour governments. And that seems to me to matter. The Scots are trying to say something. This is the kind of values we have. We can say it in other ways. We can say it with our national bard, a man's a man for all that, Jock Tamson's bairns. These all sum up the idea of a communitarian society that does not exist in the governance structures that surround us. And I'm coming back to my point here. We have the powers to change some of that now. But currently I don't think we have the will. Because actually, we have a British default. If you have been living for as long as we have within the UK setup, although we know what we don't want, and there's plenty of this we don't want, we know that, what's the alternative? We don't have a very clear idea of that. And that's where I just want to tell a wee story here. I don't know about other folk in the room, but I can ski. Anybody else? It's not able to ski. In fact, can anybody ski here? Right, see, everybody's too ashamed to say they could ski if they could ski, because that's kind of a bit those and such and so. And that's one of the reasons I didn't learn, because it seemed like not the kind of thing that, you know, what ordinary folk did was basically mess around with a caser, whether you were a female or a male. You know, they didn't do stuff that needed kit. So I never learned to ski. But anyway, later on, more recently, my stepdaughters wanted to learn, so we went off to France, and we were at the top of the hill. And I had not been listening to the instructor, so I basically belted off down the hill without knowing how to stop. And if any of you have tried this, it's not to be recommended. Anyway, I was kind of tanking down the hill, and I saw a wee lassie sitting at the bottom. And I thought, oh no, because I was just going straight for her. So I tried to kind of move, but of course I had no moves, so I was just still heading straight for her. So I kind of counted before I hit her, knocked my head, got no sympathy. And afterwards, Rosie said to me, were you not listening to the instructor? And I said, well, you know, evidently not. And he said, what you needed to do was look where you want to go, and your skis will follow. Where were we looking? Well, I was looking at the wee lassie. I was so fixated on her, on trying to avoid her, I was heading straight, I was making myself go towards her. And it was one of these moments, I don't know if you've got ways like this, that you look at them sometimes, and they're 12, but you think they've just come out with wisdom like a 91-year-old or something. And I thought, this is actually a big life lesson. It is that when you want to avoid something, you need to look where you want to go, not at it, or you will go straight towards it. The more energy you channel into the things you want to avoid in life, the more you head straight towards them. So what I'm saying now is, actually forget England, forget Westminster, forget the model that most people realise they don't want. What we need is, we need to look where we want to go. We need to be looking in a different direction and learning as much as we can about what small northern social democracies are capable of, because that's our future. That's what we need to know now. So personally speaking, I quite agree there are many things wrong with the way that Westminster operates. They've been listed. Enough. The question is, What is it we're heading towards that's an alternative? And actually, the alternative is stunningly doable. It's sitting beside us, and it's doing very well. If you take various things that the Nordics have been particularly good at, the smallest beautiful thing, strangely, it seems true. At the moment, Britain has lost its AAA credit rating. You realise that we lost it last year. A miracle, actually, we hung on to it for so long. And that is basically the countries that are deemed by the money markets to be good for it. The ones that are most likely to repay money. What are those countries? They're all the Nordic countries, around populations of 5 to 10 million. They're Switzerland and Singapore, also small countries. And they're all the properly federal countries of Australia, Canada and Germany. Now, they're interesting. Let's just look at them for a minute. Because Australia and Canada are full of Aryan folk. And the first thing those guys did when they set up their new country, so impressed were they with the mother of parliaments that they had come from, was to incorporate none of it in the governments that they created, because they created federal states. They didn't create one whopping great country where one city dominated the rest, nor did they create what we're currently heading towards, which is completely asymmetric devolution, where you get a bunch of narky guys like us making a fuss. We get fed biscuits, shut them up, give them some more powers. But the rest of the UK, none. It's still, England is a 60 million population unit, which is the largest centralised state, probably in Europe now, with no intention of changing. So, okay, if anyone thinks that works, tell me another country in the world, another successful country, that has got one constituent part, Scotland way off on one, practically a way off and devolved, and the rest of it run as one unit, like we will have soon in Britain. Okay, Wales and Northern Ireland also exceptions. But the 60 million, it matters. Basically, the tail cannot wag the dog. And we are the tail. In numerical terms, we cannot be more than a tail in this UK. Now, that would be okay if we had a receptive dog. We haven't. We've been trying for 30 years to say something via our voting, via our positions on the poll tax, via our thoughts on Trident. We've been trying to say something about a different way to run a country, a different set of priorities. And possibly a lot of people think Thatcher was the tin lid. Actually, Blair was the tin lid. Blair and Brown were the tin lids. Because all our hopes were there that that would rectify something and give us back a kind of idea of the UK as a sort of viable social democracy. It didn't happen. It's not going to happen. And I don't feel any kind of happiness in saying that, but the United Kingdom is now not listening, and I don't understand the motivation of our fellow citizens in the south of England, but they are not, generally speaking, the motivations that motivate most people here. So we have alternatives, but I think what will probably be difficult for people is we don't know enough yet about many of our Nordic neighbours as to how they do things and how they do well. But a couple of characteristics: they have very small councils. And maybe Douglas and I would have a wee argument about this, but one of the problems for Scotland is we have some of the largest local authorities in the developed world. The average size in the Nordics is 14,000. That's the average size of a council that runs everything Fife does. The average size in Scotland is 165,000. And we are way off beam on this. Equally, when it comes to land, which is something we could tackle now, we have the most concentrated form of land ownership. You know this, probably in the developed world. It's embarrassing. It's crippling. It's the reason that we can't get affordable housing half the time, because scarcity pushes up land values. It's the reason we've never stopped doffing the cap in many rural areas, mercifully not Fife. But it's also the reason that Fife folk end up at the side of lochs up around Lochburn or whatever, with a couple of carry-outs, and get shooed away like there's some sort of underclass, because that's not our country. And this is not experienced by other people. Other countries do what no government in the United Kingdom or Scotland yet has ever done. It puts its own people first. It empowers those people because it knows their capacity is high. And I wonder sometimes, and this is why I think it's important that citizens get back on the boat, whatever happens on September the 18th. I wonder sometimes if our masters and mistresses, if our politicians, if our leaders actually have faith in us as people to the degree that we ought to have. I wonder if we have faith in one another. Because we have been treated like kicked cats in Scotland for such a long time, I don't know if we realise what we're capable of ourselves. And that's a difficulty with the referendum, because I think you need to feel a confidence, not just in the captain, but the crew. We're the crew. And I know, because of some of the things I've experienced in Scotland, I know what the capacity of this place is. And it's something I've written about in the book, Blossom there. But for example, Egg, the Island of Egg, I was a trustee of the Island of Egg for 8 years. And the reason I was made a trustee at the start is simple: I couldn't be evicted, because I didn't live there. Now how shameful is that? That people who simply wanted to set up a community development trust on an island had to get other folk to be on that trust, because just that act of defiance could mean they were evicted. And that's 20 years ago. It's still happening all over Scotland, that degree of deference and fear about standing up for your own basic rights. But the point is about the capacity of the people. At the start of that, I can remember going there and speaking to Maggie Fife, who some of you may have seen on the box. She's a spokesperson for Egg. And there was a problem with refuse collection. And I happened to know somebody in Highland region. I had the number in my head. So I phoned up the thing, got through, and handed her the phone. And she took it from me and put it back on the cradle. And I said, what was that about? And she said, I can't bear it. I actually cannot bring myself to talk to another guy who's probably going to give me the runaround, probably going to give me a lot of porkies actually about when they'll come and fix it. I just don't want to even know about this anymore, because nothing gets done, nothing gets fixed in this place. Now that was 1991. Cut to today, Maggie is the secretary of the Isle of Egg Trust, cheerfully moving millions of quid from account to account as a result of those guys taking on an island that many people thought was a basket case. They've turned it round. They have now got the biggest achievement of the lot. Their own children live there. Do you know how? Because they own the land, they've been able to give the land to young folk in a shared equity deal, such that the kids can start building pretty quick right now. And if they then decide to sell their homes at some time in the future, they pay part of the money back to the Isle of Egg Trust. What's not to like? We should be doing that all over Scotland now. Not waiting for anybody else, but where's the will? Where's the belief that we can do it, that we're worth it, that our children are worth it? Where's the confidence to take on the real establishments? And they're not just the ones that John mentioned, they are in our own midst. They are landowners, they are landed power, they are people within many of the political parties. Scotland has got its own problems within Scotland to tackle. But we need to have a new start to be able to get to grips with some of those things and realise that the only difference that there is between the Nordic nations and this country, it's not the capacity of the people, not at all. Because actually the people who have stood up and done something for the communities in Scotland are like giants, because they have done it against authorities usually, with no help whatsoever, usually, with often some aggro from their neighbours. It's Scotland, come on, usually. All of those things have been drag factors on the people who have managed to create change in this country, whereas in other countries that were better governed and better sized, they've usually done it with the backing of the authorities. So make no mistake, the folk who've made change in Scotland, and those are everybody from the community buyouts to the proud history of Fife miners, to the history of community-led housing in Glasgow, where community cooperatives work now. All these people that took on the authorities and had belief in themselves are giants. And the only difference that there is between those folk and the people in the Nordic countries is that no government in this country has trusted and empowered us. And our future and our destiny is to fix that. That's the purpose of us, I think. And we're lucky to be living at a stage for our grandparents and for our children that we can sort it out, because it's not okay. It's not okay to be like this anymore. So to me, this is a great moment for us to kind of move forward, and that's my goal. It's not to worry too much anymore about our comparisons with south of the border. It's to lift our chins, get our heads out of the gutter, which we too often share with south of the border in many, many respects. And let's face it, you know, when it comes to things like democracy, we had a turnout at our last local elections of 38%, which is rubbish. England, however, had a turnout of 32%. Resultamundo. We did a little bit better than them. No. That's not good enough anymore. The European average is 70% turnout. The Nordic average is 80% without compulsion. Let's lift our heads and look towards the countries that are doing well, and let's begin to have higher aspirations for ourselves. The aspiration that if our energy was not so constantly tripped up by a combination of top-down governance like no other place in Europe, a sort of clipboard mentality of professionalism that doubts the capacity of the ordinary person who's perfectly able to get on with stuff themselves. If we could get all of those things shifted, the release of energy in this country would be absolutely astonishing, and I hope I live to see that. I've seen it in certain places in this country, like Egg. You need to have been there beforehand to go back and think, wow, every time. But you know yourselves, you can see that in your own lives. What we need to have now is that at a whole social level, and it won't be over on September the 19th. Even if there's a yes vote, those of you who have wains will know, it doesn't stop when the baby is born, does it? In fact, the hard work only starts then, and that's what will be true for Scotland too. We need to be pushing for the kind of society we've always wanted to become. Now we need to make it happen. Thank you.